In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 character archetypes that are an absolute must in every work of narrative nonfiction. So a memoir is a narrative nonfiction. Okay, so the first archetype that is an absolute must that you'll find in every work of narrative nonfiction, here I have one here, made by Stephanie Land, is the hero. The hero is the narrator and the narrator is you. This is an archetype. So if you think about archetypes, they're basically a character that serves a purpose. Now, narrative nonfiction is storytelling, just like a movie is storytelling. A work of fiction is storytelling. Narrative nonfiction is not a how-to guide, which does not have a hero, okay? The narrator of a how-to guide or any other kind of basic nonfiction, general nonfiction, is not a hero. But in a memoir, it is. So let's say if you think about Wild by Cheryl Strayed, she was the hero. If you think about Educated by Tara Westover, she was the hero. In my book, I had my second book, A Letter from Paris. Thankfully, I had learned a lot about the hero's journey. And I wrote that book considering myself the hero. This is the reason that the hero or the narrator is the hero in narrative nonfiction is because people read memoir, people read narrative nonfiction because they want to relate to a story. They want to see themselves played out on the page, battling these human conditions that every human has, and ultimately coming out on top and surviving and achieving something or transforming at the end. And so you really need to think of yourself as the hero of the story. And this is why I teach a lot more about the trademarks of the hero, the purpose of the hero, what the hero does in certain stages of the story, the first act, the second act, the third act, and common misconceptions around the hero in my 90-day memoir course. If you are having trouble thinking of yourself as the hero, it really... sometimes it helps me if I just flip it on the lid and I go, okay, well, how am I not the victim here? Okay. If you are making any proactive choices that are influencing the story, so you are moving the narrative along, you are taking action, you are, taking action and moving the story along, not just sitting there stewing in your own misery, then you are definitely the hero. If you think about that and you think, actually, no, I didn't take any action and nothing changed, then you're definitely not the hero, you're a victim, and you need to learn how the hero works and the ultimate aspects of the hero's journey. In Maslow's hierarchy, he talks about the psychological levels of human actualization. And I actually personally think that the purpose of the hero in every true story and the reason why people need the narrator to be that hero archetype, and I'm not saying you need to physically slay a dragon, it can be an internal process too. The reason people need that is because the ultimate goal of growth and life the ultimate goal is actualization. And the hero's journey, I really love the hero's journey, and I teach it in 90-day memoir because it follows the path of human actualization, self-actualization, from beginning to end of the hero's journey. So if you want to know more about the hero's journey, to write a better narrative nonfiction, a literary memoir that will sell, my 90-day memoir course is... it teaches you every aspect of that traditional hero's journey story structure and how you can write a compelling and sellable literary memoir with that story structure. I take you through each stage. I give you story prompts and guides, my own examples, best-selling examples, movie examples from really compelling popular narratives, because that's what memoir is. It's narrative nonfiction. Okay, now I want to talk about the second archetype that you will find in a personal story or a true story, a narrative nonfiction. And that is the enemy or the villain. You cannot have a story without a villain, an enemy, a block, a challenge of some kind. And you don't need to think about this as being a person. It doesn't have to be a person who is villainous. It can be an act of God. It can be an act of nature. It can be an accident. It can be something that you witness. There just needs to be a force of struggle, problem, conflict, something that poses a block or a challenge to the hero. Otherwise, there is nowhere for the story to go. And there are so many purposes to the villain and the enemy, or the this block archetype. There are many purposes to this. The ultimate purpose is to force the hero to grow. And this is why I think that writing your memoir is such an internally rebalancing and empowering process, is because it helps you to see how actually everything has been for your greater good and your greater growth. Even those blocks, even when your house fell down, or you were in that car accident, or you went through that shocking divorce, it was ultimately for your greater good. And if you work your way through the hero's journey and the major archetypes of the hero's journey, of which the villain or the enemy is one, you will get a better understanding of that as you write your book. So the villain or the enemy archetype, I go much further into their purpose in terms of the story, where they typically show up, how they can show up, typical symbols and activities that the villain or the enemy does, and basically their ultimate purpose in your narrative in my 90-day memoir program. And then there's one last archetype I really have to mention, because no story exists without this archetype. And I just think it's really, really beneficial to think about how this archetype plays out in your life, even if you're not writing a literary memoir. And that is the ally. An ally can be a bird, a cat, a friend, a message, an email, a key that you find, an object. An ally is basically something that helps you progress in your goal. And often the ally shows up, I go much more into detail in this in the 90-day memoir program, but an ally will help you to, let's say, if you look at Wild by Cheryl Strayed, she had many allies in that very, very difficult journey which she did across the Pacific Crest Trail. And I think animals are a really good example, and birds can be really good. And also elements of nature can be allies. So being saved by a rainfall, or being saved by even a dry spell is an example of an ally in your journey. And the reason I think it's really psychotherapeutic to think about your archetypes that are playing out in your journey is it helps you to see that you're ultimately always being supported. Doesn't matter what your challenge is that you're writing about, doesn't matter what experience you have had, there have been allies. If you can't find an ally, I don't think you're really looking at your story properly. So I hope this has helped you, just gives you a little snapshot of what I talk about in much more detail in my signature comprehensive program, 90-day memoir, and also why I'm so passionate about teaching the hero's journey and these archetypes in terms of character archetypes for narrative nonfiction. The reason they work so well is because it's very satisfying to read a work of a personal story where the human is, the narrator is playing this hero, and where the other characters are clearly identifiable as these certain archetypes, because otherwise you can get really confused and it just doesn't feel satisfying. That's the whole thing about story and compelling story structure. It's satisfying to the reader. And if you watch blockbuster Hollywood movies, those typical rom-coms, or even action movies, they all use these archetypes, and it's because they signal us on a very unconscious level. It's all about myth and the collective unconscious. They signal to us, the viewer or the reader of the story, that things are going to be balanced out. And they follow, it's almost like a musical score, the way that they play out throughout the story structure. So Anyway, I'm going to stop now, but that's what I teach in 90-Day Memoir, the 12-Stage Hero's Journey, how to use it to write your compelling literary memoir, to sell it to a publisher, how you can use it to actually process your story and see things in a different light. Archetypes, the 3-act story structure, trademarks of best-selling memoirs, and also how to revise it and make sure it's in tip-top shape to send and submit to a publisher.